Stunning horror stories. It was October when I first arrived at the old farmhouse. The air had that crisp chill to it, the kind that makes you want to curl up with a warm blanket and a cup of tea. The fog crept in like a thick, damp blanket, covering everything in its path. I had just left a messy chapter of my life behind. Broken relationships, a job I could no longer stand. I needed peace. I needed to escape. And when I found that farmhouse, dilapidated but charming, with its peeling paint and weathered wood, I thought it would be the perfect place to reset. At first, everything felt normal. Well, as normal as it could be in a house that had stood for over a century. The wooden floors creaked beneath my feet, and the air smelled of old dust and stale wood. But there was something about it that felt alive, not in a good way. But I tried to ignore that. I thought it was just the isolation, the change of scenery. It would take some getting used to, I figured. I spent the first night by the fire, a glass of wine in hand, trying to shake off the unsettled feeling that clung to me. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. The house creaked and groaned like it was trying to speak, but I told myself it was nothing to worry about. After all, it was an old house. They make noises, right? But then the whispers started. At first, I thought I was just hearing things. A faint, soft whisper, almost like the wind. I shrugged it off. After all, the wind was fierce outside. But then it came again. Louder this time. "Get out!" it hissed. "Leave!" I froze. The voice was raspy, like someone trying to speak through a fog. A voice that didn't belong. I looked around the room, my heart pounding. But I saw nothing, just shadows stretching across the walls. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the whispers didn't stop. They kept coming, growing more insistent, more desperate. "Get out now!" I stood up, my legs shaking, and reached for my phone. I dialed the landlord's number, my fingers trembling. The call went straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the phone. My breathing felt too loud in the silence. Then I heard it again. The voice, clearer this time, coming from the far corner of the room. "Leave," it demanded. I bolted. My heart was racing, my hands shaking as I grabbed my jacket and ran out of the house into the cold night air. I didn't stop until I was far enough from the farmhouse that I couldn't see it anymore. The house loomed in the distance, dark, silent. But I knew better now. I knew it was waiting. I spent the night at a hotel, but even there I couldn't shake the feeling. The whispers, they followed me. They were there in the silence, just on the edge of my hearing. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was watching me. The next day I returned to the farmhouse. I don't know why. Maybe I was trying to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe I just wanted answers. But deep down, I knew I shouldn't go back. The house wasn't empty. It never had been. That night, the whispers returned, louder, clearer, more demanding. "Help me," a voice croaked from the corner of the room. "Please." The voice sounded like it was in pain, like it had been calling out for help for years. "Please, help me." I froze. I couldn't move. The air around me grew heavier, colder. I felt something in the room, something unseen, pressing down on me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure. At first I thought it was just my imagination. But then it moved. Slowly. Deliberately. A woman, pale and gaunt. Her face was hollow, her eyes two empty black sockets staring at me. Her hair hung around her face in tangled clumps, and her skin was ashen, almost translucent. I couldn't breathe. Her eyes, those empty eyes, locked onto mine. I could feel her presence. It was as if she were inside my head, her voice flooding my mind. "Help me," she whispered again. But this time I wasn't sure if it was her voice or if it was the house itself speaking through her. Her body jerked forward and I instinctively stepped back, my heart hammering in my chest. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. The room went cold. The whispers faded away, leaving nothing but the sound of my ragged breathing. I didn't stay that night. I couldn't. I grabbed my things, didn't care about the lease, didn't care about the money. I just had to leave, and I never looked back. I don't know who or what that woman was or why she was haunting that place, but I know she wasn't the only one. The house, it wasn't just old. It wasn't just falling apart. It was alive, and it was waiting. If you ever find yourself near that farmhouse, don't stop. Don't even slow down. The whispers, they'll follow you. And once you hear them, once they get inside your head, there's no going back. Because that house, it doesn't let go. This is The True Haunting, horror story number 2. It's strange how you can spend so much time in a place thinking you know it inside and out, only to realize it's hiding something darker, something that was never there when you first walked in. I'm Jack. I'm not someone who typically tells ghost stories. In fact, I don't even believe in that sort of thing. I'm practical. Things have explanations even if you have to dig deep to find them. But that was before I moved into that house. I didn't even want to move there, honestly. My job kept me on the road, traveling all the time. But the company found me a place. A good deal, they said. A small 2-story house on the outskirts of town. Old, but well kept. The previous owner had passed away unexpectedly, and the house had been vacant for months. No one seemed to mind much. It seemed like a decent spot to rest after long shifts. I moved in on a chilly Friday night. The kind of night where the cold sneaks up on you, but it doesn't feel threatening. Not yet. I carried my stuff in, unpacked, and settled in for the night. The house creaked a bit, of course. It was old, after all. But it felt normal. So I went to bed around midnight. I was tired from the long day, and I figured I'd sleep like a rock. But that first night, that was when things started to feel off. I woke up in the middle of the night, the house completely still around me. But something didn't feel right. I heard it. A soft, barely audible sound. It was a whisper, almost impossible to place. I thought maybe I was dreaming. Maybe it was just the wind. Jack. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I could hear it. My name, clear as day, like it was coming from somewhere in the room. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone there, a stranger who'd wandered in, maybe, or worse, some kind of prank. But there was nothing, just the darkness. I lay there in shock, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my heart to slow down. Maybe I was just imagining it, I thought. Maybe I was dreaming. But then, just as I was starting to calm down, the voice came again. Jack. I felt the cold chill of fear wash over me. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't in my head. I could hear it, clear as day. It wasn't some passing sound. It was a voice, calm, steady, but urgent. Who's there? I asked, my voice shaking. But there was no answer. The room was still. The silence hung in the air, like it was pressing down on me. There was nothing but the emptiness around me. I lay there motionless, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to ignore it, tried to dismiss it as the house settling or the wind. But then it came again. The voice, this time louder, more insistent. Jack. My pulse quickened. I felt my skin prickle. I wasn't alone. That much I knew. Who's there? I asked again, my voice barely more than a whisper. But no answer. Just that same cold silence. I turned over, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone, the light from the screen the only thing piercing the dark. I texted my friend asking if I was just hearing things, but no reply came. I was alone, with whatever was in that room. The next night I tried to brush it off. I convinced myself it was just an old house creaking. But when I got into bed, that same unease crept back in. The room was still, too still. The air felt thick, as if something was watching. Then I heard it again. The whisper, soft but definite. "Jack." I sat up, wide awake. It was closer now. It felt like it was in the room with me, right beside me. I could almost feel the air change, feel the temperature drop. My heartbeat hammered in my chest. "Who's there?" I said again, my voice now desperate. But again, no answer. No one. The whispers started to shift, no longer just saying my name. They became different. "Help me," came the voice, faint but unmistakable. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't understand it. Who was asking for help? Why wasn't anyone else hearing this? It didn't make sense. The next few nights were no better. The whispers became more frequent. I'd hear them in the middle of the day when I was eating lunch or when I was in the shower. Soft, barely there whispers. "Jack," they'd say. And sometimes it was more than that. "Help me. You have to help me." I could feel my grip on reality slipping. The walls of the house, they seemed to close in on me. My mind raced. Was I imagining it? Or was this house haunted? Then, one night, it escalated. I was sitting in the living room trying to distract myself watching TV. And that's when I heard the knock. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was coming from the basement. I froze. I sat there paralyzed with fear. I couldn't bring myself to move, but the knocking continued, steady, rhythmic, as if something or someone was inside the walls asking to be let out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go down there. I didn't want to see what was making that sound, but I couldn't ignore it, could I? No, I had to know. I grabbed a flashlight and headed down the basement stairs, my hands shaking, my stomach in knots. It was pitch black down there, except for the beam of my flashlight, which danced nervously in front of me as I descended into the darkness. The knocking continued, louder now, coming from a corner near the far wall. And that's when I saw it, something moving behind the wall, something I couldn't explain. I pulled the boards away from the wall, my heart racing. My breath was shallow. The knocking grew louder, almost frantic, and I could feel my own panic rising, my hands trembling uncontrollably. And then I saw it. A figure, so faint, so translucent, but undeniably there. A person, or something like it. The figure looked skeletal, like a body with no flesh, just bones wrapped in thin, tattered skin. Its eyes, wide, terrified, locked on mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. It raised a hand reaching out toward me, its voice a whisper, desperate. "Help me!" I stumbled backward, panic flooding my veins. I didn't care what it was, who it was. I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I ran back upstairs, grabbed my things, and didn't look back. I left that night and never returned. The house was abandoned again, and I moved far away. But to this day, I still hear it. Sometimes when I'm alone in the stillness of the night, I'll hear it, faint but clear. The whisper, "Help me." And I know now that sometimes the walls don't just hide pipes and creaky beams. Sometimes they hide things you can't explain, things you can never escape. And as I lie in bed at night with the silence around me, I know I'll always hear it. That voice. Help me. Always. This is the True Haunting horror story number 3. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. You know the kind. Getting away from the noise, from the clutter of everyday life. I thought this farmhouse would be the answer. Tucked away on the outskirts of town, surrounded by nothing but rolling hills and wide open spaces. It felt peaceful. The perfect retreat to recharge. But when I first stepped inside, something wasn't right. It was subtle, almost like a shift in the air. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt it. You know that feeling, right? That sense that something's just off? I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was just an old house and old houses creak and groan. It was probably nothing. But over the next few days, I couldn't ignore it. That feeling, that heaviness in the air, it grew. Slowly, quietly. But it was there, like a shadow stalking me from every corner of the house. At first it was just small things, strange noises, creaking floorboards, old pipes rattling in the walls. I told myself it was just the house settling. That was it. Nothing to worry about. But then, the whispers started. I thought I was hearing things. I had to be. I was alone, after all. The house was empty. Yet I heard faint voices so soft I couldn't make out the words. There was no one there. Still, I heard them. Whispering. Always just out of reach. But no matter where I was, the voices followed me. If I was in the kitchen, I'd hear it. If I was upstairs, brushing my teeth, I'd hear it. In the middle of the night, when everything should have been silent, the whispers would creep into my ears. At first, I tried to ignore it, convinced it was just my mind playing tricks. But no matter how hard I tried to block it out, the voices wouldn't stop. And then it changed. The whispers weren't just whispers anymore, they became words. Faint at first, but unmistakable. Help. Me. My heart froze. I couldn't breathe. I spun around expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one. Nothing. I stood there staring into the empty room. My heart was racing and my hands were shaking. Was I losing my mind? Was this a joke? Was someone playing a trick on me? But there was no one there. Nothing moved. I was alone. The whispers had stopped and I convinced myself it was just a fluke. Maybe the wind. Maybe the old house creaked in just the right way. But deep down I knew it wasn't the wind. That night, when the sun had set and the world outside had turned to black, the house felt different. The walls felt thick, like they were closing in on me. I couldn't explain it. I just felt it. The air was colder than usual. It had a weight to it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, listening to me. And then, I heard it again. Help. Me. The voice. It wasn't in the walls anymore. It was close. So close I could almost feel it. My heart pounded in my chest. My hands were clammy, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I turned toward the sound, my neck stiff, my body frozen. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight, my legs unsteady beneath me. The house felt so much bigger now. The shadows seemed to stretch farther, reaching into every corner. The floor creaked beneath my weight as I made my way toward the basement. The basement. Something about it felt wrong. But I had to find the source of the voice. I made my way down the stairs, each step echoing through the house like a drum beat. The flashlight flickered, casting long shadows on the damp stone walls. And then I saw it. The furnace. Old, rusted, and standing there like it was waiting for me. The whispers were louder now, more frantic. I was close. I approached the furnace, my breath shallow, my mind racing. And then it moved. The wall behind it just moved. Like it was alive, like it had been waiting for me to find it. A passage opened up, dark and narrow, leading into an unknown part of the house. The whispers called to me, urging me forward. Every cell in my body screamed at me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to know. I stepped into the passage, the walls pressing in on me, closing in tighter with every step I took. The air grew colder, the flashlight beam bouncing off the jagged walls as I moved deeper. I didn't know where it was leading me. All I knew was that the whispers, they were getting louder, more insistent. They were real. I came to a small, dimly lit room at the end of the passage. My flashlight danced over the walls, and that's when I saw it. A chair in the middle of the room. It was bent at an odd angle, like it had been thrown there, discarded. And then I saw the scratches on the walls, jagged, deep gouges, like someone had tried to escape, tried to claw their way out. I stepped forward, the air thick with fear, and noticed something on the floor. A piece of paper. I bent down, my hands trembling as I picked it up. The paper was old, yellowed with time, and the ink was faded, but still legible. I tried to escape, but the house, it won't let me. It won't let anyone leave. Please, if you find this, don't stay. I could barely read the rest. It was smudged, as if someone had written it in a hurry, in a panic. Who had left this behind? Before I could process the words, the temperature in the room plummeted. The air became icy, like someone was breathing down my neck. The whispers returned, louder this time, panicked. Help! Me! Please! I turned, my pulse skyrocketing, but there was no one there. Nothing but shadows, pressing in from every corner of the room. I stumbled backward toward the passage. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out. But then, the ground beneath me gave way. I fell, crashing to the floor, the cold darkness swallowing me whole. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke, I was back in the living room. Daylight filtered through the windows. It was bright, normal. Everything was normal, except it wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something had followed me back. And even now, years later, when I'm alone in the dark, I still hear the whispers, soft and faint like a memory just at the edge of my hearing. I know I'm not alone. The house is still out there, watching, waiting.